Alright guys, let's set up the TwidoSuite. We're going to start off with a nice simple two-wire program and see how it works. So we're going to start off by opening up our TwidoSuite. I'll put the link below for where you find this program. This is for the Schneider product, PLC. It's a great little PLC. The software is free and there's no yearly fee for licensing either. I love this PLC. I was a little bit hesitant at first because I've been I learned everything with Alan Bradley at school. But now looking at the Twido, it's very, very similar to the Alan Bradley way of programming. And once you get your head around the different notations for your inputs and outputs, it's identical to the Alan Bradley product, but without the licensing fee. All right, so let's start this up. We're going to go into the programming mode. I've chosen English and French when I've installed it. There's a number of different languages that you can choose from. So you go into programming mode here, and that'll bring up our TwidoSuite. My computer's a little bit slow today. Let's see what's going on. Okay, for you starting up a new project, you're most likely going to be clicking on this guy, create a new project, and then you'll be able to pick the exact PLC and analog input card that you need. I'm going to open up a recent project because I've already picked up my PLC and analog card and got everything set up. Okay, so we're going to start off with this two-wire here, so I'll open this bad boy up. Okay, now the program's open. If I go to, the first thing I want to do is I want to go to describe. Once you go to describe, then you can see here that I've grabbed this PLC right here. So this matches, so this TWDLC E40DRF, that matches with the exact PLC that I'm wiring to. And I've grabbed that from here with the bases. Mine is a compact PLC. So what was that? DLC E40DRF. So DLC E40DRF. There we go right here. So once you click on this, it'll physically bring that PLC over and you can drop it onto the page. Okay, so very similar to when you're using a Siemens product or an Allen Bradley, you're telling it exactly which PLC that you're working with. Okay, in addition to that, I've got some analog inputs. I'm not going to be making use of the analog inputs, but I need to tell it that it's there as well. So that is over here in my expansion modules, analog expansions, and this one is the TMT AMM6HT. So scrolling down, this guy right here. So that matches with the exact product number of analog input card that I have. Again, you're going to drop it over, drop it in, and then you'll have the appropriate hardware on your page. Once you've done that, then you can come over here and you can double click on this piece right here with this Ethernet cable. And here you're going to set your IP address. Okay, once you've set your IP address, like the one that I'm going to be using is 11, but in our shop we have a number of different PLCs. So you want to make sure that the exact IP address matches with the PLC that you're going to be hooking up to. We've got some touch screens and drives, so their IP addresses are below. Okay, as long as that is fine, then we'll move on. Okay, but make sure that this is crucial, making sure this is correct if you want to connect into it by Ethernet later on. We're going to use their cord that they provide us with to initially put the IP address on, but after that we should be able to talk to it over the Ethernet. Excellent. So now we've set up our PLC and our analog input card. Let's get right into our programming. So we're coming over here to program. Now when this page comes up, this is going to provide you with your inputs and your output data table here. So here's our inputs here. So the inputs on the Twidos are %IO.0. Again, it's starting at 0 and going to, there's a number of them, but similar to the Allen Bradley, they're going from 0 to 15 for the first word. And for these guys, I have my input connected to input number 1 for this project. So I'm going to use my input 1 because that's where I have my start push button actually wired up to. So you'll notice that I'll put it in lowercase. When I hit enter, it'll go to uppercase. So I'm just going to make use of one input and one output. So I'm going to use input 0.1, so that's looking at bit number 1 of the first word. And if I scroll down here to my outputs, so there's my table of outputs there. Outputs on the Twido are %Q, 0 is the word, dot, 0 is the first bit. So I'm going to use the first output, but not actually this one actually. Give me 2 seconds, let me just see where I have light actually wired up to, because I know it's not connected up to Q0. Hang on for a minute. Now I've wired up my indicator light to Q6. So I'm going to put my indicator light, number 1, is this guy right here. And then I've also got a motor contactor that is connected up to input 2. So let me put that in right now. And I'll show you how that works as well. But we'll start off with the light. Now, you can go straight to program, and it'll ask you to apply those changes. If you didn't, let me just go back to configure. If you didn't hit that, then once you made some changes, you could just hit apply here, and it would apply the changes before it moved over to a different window. But now those values are in there for my start and for my light and for my motor contactor. So we're going over here to program next. Okay, so I've already got my rung here from the previous time that I was working on it, but let me get rid of this first. So I'm gonna right click on this and delete it. And the first thing we need to do in a Twido program is to just insert a rung. So they say add a section here, so I can just add a section and it will drop a rung in for me. Again, everything starts at 0, so this is rung 0, but that is your first rung of your ladder logic. Now I'm going to explain all of these contacts that are above here in a later video, but if you're like me, when you start up one of these videos and you want to learn about PLCs, you really just want to delve right into it. So you've already got the TwidoSuite installed on your PLC. You've gone through the same steps as I have. You may not have a PLC in front of you, but I'll show you how you can simulate your program and have the same outputs as I do. Now, we have 2 inputs here. We have a contact normally open, which is the same as an examine if closed in Allen Bradley. And over here we have a contact normally closed, which would be the same as an examine if open. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to use this one right here. I'm going to call this, instead of calling it a normally open, I'm going to call this an examine if closed, and I'm going to drop it down, and I'm going to drop it down to that rung. You can see that it's green now, so it will drop in there. And then I need an output. So instead of saying output energize or OTE, this one just says coil, and that is the standard output for the TwidoSuite. So we'll click on this guy, so we'll left click there, and it drops my rung, sorry, my output at the end of the rung. And you'll notice that the last thing to go into this rung is the output. You never have an input after the output. So it doesn't seem like it even gives you that option here. So the outputs will always be here on the far right hand side. Okay, so now we just have to address these guys. So for this one, I'm going to address this one the same as my start push button. And if memory serves me right, that was input 0.1. And I've already labeled that in my I/O table. So that is my start push button. And then my light that I want to turn on was, so I'll click right here for the address. Come on, buddy. Now it already comes up with a %. The outputs for Twidos are Q. I'm going to look at the 0 word, because remember that there's 16 bits in that first word, so that 0 corresponds to the word. And then I'm just going to look at the 6th bit of information on that word, because I have physically wired my light to that 6th terminal. Excellent. Okay, so I have my start push button, my indicator light, and because I've already done my input-output table there and my labeling, everything comes in on my symbols here. If I wanted to add in a part number or anything or a comment above, I could do that as well. Okay. Next thing I want to do, now that we've finished this nice simple program, is I want to go down here and I want to analyze the program. So that's just going to confirm that everything's cool with the way that I've set it up and I haven't screwed up any labeling. And if I click So let's see, I left clicked on that and it brings up the fact that I have no errors whatsoever, which is always a bonus. If there was an error, it will tell us exactly where it is, and I'll show you that in next videos. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to save this bad boy, so I'm going to left click there on the save, and then I'm going to go to simulate, and I'll show you how you can simulate this program here. Okay, it takes a little bit of time to come in. Okay, so it's talking to the simulator. There we go. Now sometimes that doesn't work. Don't worry if it says it's impossible to do the simulation. Just stop it and then try to do the simulator again. For some reason, sometimes it doesn't work. So now that we've got this up and running, what I need to do is I just need to come over here to the play button, and I'm going to left click on the play button and hit OK. And now I'm live. You can see that I'm in the run. The run's now gone from a yellow to a green. So I'm running my simulator now. And right here, there is a data table here that I can now go through, and I can highlight different terminals or different inputs or different outputs, and I can physically turn them on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over input number 1, and that corresponds to my start push button. And as soon as I left click on that guy, then this changes state. So when things change state in the PLC program, they often are green. So when this guy is true, then my output turns on. Excellent. Okay, if I left click on this again, then it will turn it off. And now that this is no longer true, then the output turns off as well. Let's see if I can fire that output on without having an input. So I'm going to left click on the 6 that corresponds to my indicator light there. And no, doesn't seem like that works. But if I do toggle my input there, then it's allowing my output to turn on. Beautiful. So it's a quick and easy way that you can simulate your program. So it's awesome when you get into the timers and counters and everything. I'm not physically connected up to my PLC whatsoever. So now what we'll do is we'll hit stop. Okay. We're going to come down here and stop the simulation. Beautiful. And now I'm actually going to hook up the PLC. So I've connected my USB cable. I'll give you guys the part numbers down below in the comment section. So in order to establish communication with the PLC, I've got to first connect up that USB cable. Then I'm going to go to debug. And at this point, I have a number of options: COM8, COM6. COM6 wasn't working for me. And I haven't set up an Ethernet connection yet. So I'm going to use the USB cable that's physically hardwired into my PLC right now, and it's connected up to COM8. So I'm going to say OK. Okay, it says that the programs are a little bit different. So I'm going to transfer from my computer to the controller. Yeah, that's cool. That's just telling you that there's a previous program on there that you're going to wipe out when you drop this on there. Again, it takes a little bit of time to drop your program on there, even though we only have the one rung there. And as soon as it establishes communication, then it looks identical to the simulator now. So what I want to do now is I want to run. Beautiful. Okay, so now I'm up and running. I'm talking to the PLC now. And now instead of using the simulator, I'm physically going to press my start push button. And watch what happens right here on the input for my start push button. It should go green. There we go. Beautiful. And as soon as that start push button is pressed, then my indicator light turns on. Let it go. And this is no longer true. And so the light turns off. Okay, so I'm just physically pressing the push button. It's examining that it's closed. Once it's closed and there's voltage going to that input terminal, then it sends voltage out in the field over to that light. Beautiful. Alright guys, so this is the setup that I have at home. Sometimes it's hard to get into the lab, so I brought the lab home.
And that way I can do a few programs and then have them fire on some lights or some contactors, and we can build up some decent programs here at home that we could then use for the harder ones in the lab. So I've got my laptop set up here, and then I've got a number of different components on this board. Let me zoom in so I can show you what each of them are. Okay, so on this board I've got my PLC, so the PLC is mounted right there. I've got a number of indicator lights along here. I got a forward reverse contactor and two other contactors on the bottom. And I've got two stop start jog stations right here and here. And I got two limit switches that we'll make use of as well. Over here I've got a 24 volt DC power supply that's firing on a number of components on the board. And then down here I've got a 120 to 24 volt AC transformer. Now you'll probably see that this board changes as I do a bunch of videos here. I'm trying to find like a standard board that I could use for portable trainers for PLCs. So not everything's mint, but it's good enough for now. Now let me just zoom in and I'll show you a couple of the components here. Okay, so here's my Twido PLC. On the top I have DC inputs, and on the bottom I have AC outputs. So what I've done is I've powered up right here on these terminals right here. That's my 120 going into the PLC, and the PLC has a rectifier circuit. So on the top, you can just make out, let me zoom in here guys, sorry. You can just make out right here that I have 24 volts DC available. So I've made all my input sourcing, in that I've taken the positive 24 volts, gone out in the field. So in the case of my start push button, I have that positive 24 volts going from my PLC out in the field to my start push button. And from my start push button, I'm physically coming down and into my input number 1. So if we take a look here at my input terminals, I've got my input number 1 connected up to my start push button. Then over here on my common, I need to complete that circuit, so I've got the common going to the negative of my 24 volt DC power supply. When I press that push button, then you can see that the indicator light for that push button, number 1, changes state. There we go. And as that LED turns on, that's telling us that there's 24 volts being applied to that input number 1 terminal. On the bottom, I have 24 volts AC. So the way that I'm getting the 24 volts AC is I have a small transformer. So I have a 100 VA transformer right here. And it's taking the 120 volts that I have at the plug, and it's changing it to 24 volts AC. Okay, so that 24 volts AC, I'm taking my H1, I'm going through a fuse, so on the bottom I just have a little control fuse there. And that H1 is then going into my outputs, and I'm going into the common terminal on my outputs. And all my commons are then jumpered together so that they're all provided with 24 volts AC. Then whenever the PLC turns on that output, that 24 volts AC goes out in the field. In this case, if I hit my start push button, then my start push button is connected into terminal number 6. So there's terminal number 6. I physically wired that to one of my lights. And when I hit the push button here for my start push button, input 1 turns on, my output 6 fires on. So you can see that LED for output 6 just fired on. There we go. So you can see me toggling the push button, which toggles the output. And that allows, in this case, 24 volts AC to go out in the field. And if I just move over here, you'll be able to see the light turn on as that LED turns on the PLC. So the wiring is really simple. And once you get your head around the programming, PLCs aren't that difficult. They're actually really fun. I know a lot of people who have been asking for videos on PLCs. So I really want your comments below as to the quality of this video. How's the sound? Am I talking too much? Have I covered everything in an appropriate manner? or have I not covered something? So tell me exactly what I haven't covered, and I'll make sure that on the subsequent one for the 3-wire that I cover it properly. All right, guys, we'll call our quits there. So the next video is going to be on the 3-wire. I'm going to physically go through the wiring that I'm going to do for the 3-wire with a brief explanation of the XIC and XIO instructions on the PLC. Everything that I'm doing so far is going to be on the TwidoSuite. I'll follow it up with an Allen Bradley, and then from the Allen Bradley, hopefully get into some Siemens products as well. But all the projects so far will be on the TwidoSuite, but it's very close to the programming on Allen Bradley or Siemens as well. All right, guys, leave your comments below. We'll see you guys on the next video.